Hello again guys, this is Vivs here from Design Coder. In this video, let's try to understand the units of measurement in Android. First, let's take a simple example and find out what we have in terms of devices. So here in Android, if you remember, different phones have different sizes. There are tablets and there are other devices as well like Android Wear, etc. Now if you take a look at say two devices here, one of them is 320 by 480, the other one is 640 by 960. Now if you put something which is say 160 pixels, let's say you put an image which is 160 pixels wide on the smaller device over here. Notice that 160 pixels would be half of 320 pixels, so this is going to take half the space on the screen. But on a larger device which is 640 pixels, 160 is 1/4 of it, and therefore notice that the image looks smaller. So you cannot use pixels in Android because it is going to give you inconsistent looks on different devices. On the other hand, we have something called a DP in Android. Now a DP looks same everywhere. On 320 by 480 it takes half the screen space. On 640 as well it takes half the screen space. And I don't know what you guessed so far, but if you do a little math here, take a look at what's happening. Here 160 pixels and 160 dp are same, but here 160 dp seems to be twice of 160 pixels. In other words, a dp is 2 pixels over here. Then you guys say, what happens if the screen sizes are same? Take a look at this screenshot here. The image still looks different on all three devices despite the fact that the screen size is same. Now why would that be? Let's take a look at an example. The place where we had the largest image on the left hand side contains less number of pixels per inch. The place where the image was very small on the extreme right hand side, we have very high number of pixels per inch. So the density would be the number of pixels per inch, and that also changes with each device. So there are two changes that you need to tackle. One of them would be size changes, the other would be density changes. So you're like, whoa, how do I fix that? Let's take a look at the units of measurement here in Android. There are many of them like pixels, inches, millimeters, points, dps and sps. And we'll be talking about SP versus DP in this video at the end. But remember that points, millimeters and inches won't be used much, and you won't be using pixels much either. So if you take a look at this column that says density independent, notice that pixels are not density independent and they don't have the same physical size on every screen either. So your choice naturally boils down to DP and SP. So what is 1 dp? If your screen has 160 dots per inch, then 1 dp and 1 pixel are going to be the same. If your screen has 240, then 1 dp is 1.5, and conversely for 320, a dp would be 2 pixels. So dots per inch is with respect to the printers, and there is something called pixels per inch as well, which stands for on-screen resolution. Now if you're not sure about what dots per inch and what pixels per inch are, then they're out of scope of this Android discussion because they are related to printers and web browsers. If you Google dots per inch versus pixels per inch, be sure to read these nice articles, especially from Stack Exchange over here, where they talk about the difference in detail. And there's this nice post that explains the difference between dots per inch and PPI in detail. Now Android guys figured out that you can't sit and do math for everything, right? So they categorize stuff on the basis of dots per inch. So you have these categories for which you need to worry about. There's LDPI, which stands for low density. There is MDPI, medium, high, extra high, double extra high, and there is triple extra high DPI. So if your device has say 450 dots per inch, it would come right here in XHDPI. If it has 220, it's gonna be somewhere over here. It's 108, it's gonna be in LDPI, and so on. So you categorize or target for groups. You don't work with individual dots per inch or conversion with math anymore. You just need to worry about which group your device comes under, and that is already known because when the devices are released, their specification also indicates which category they support out of these. So all you need to do is make your images for these categories, scale your icons for these categories, and so on. And we'll be covering that as we go further in the app making stuff. What you need to remember at the end of this discussion is something simple. For a device with low density, a DP is going to be 0.75 pixels. For a device with medium, as you can see, 1 dp and 1 pixel are the same. If it's high density, then a dp will be 1.5 pixel. In other words, a dp is going to be bigger. If you go to extra high, then a dp is going to be 2 pixels. and there is one more for double extra high, which is 3 over there. Now let's take a real example to understand all these things better. I'm gonna compare running the same app on two devices. One of them is an Nexus 4. Its density, if you Google it out, turns out to be 318 points per inch. Now this, if you take a look at our chart here, would fall into XHDPI because it is close to 320. The other device, Nexus 6, if you take a look at its density, it says it's 518 ppi. Huge difference. If you take a look at our chart here, then 518 comes close to double XHDPI. So it's going to be considered a double XHDPI device here. So now that you know, on an XHDPI device, it's 2 times. 1 dp is 2 pixels. On HDPI, 1 dp is 1.5 pixels. On double XHDPI, it is 3 times, right? So given that, let's go to our Android Studio and take our Hello World app here. Now notice that I have a view here inside my relative layout. Now this view is nothing but a rectangular area with a width of 256 pixels and 256 pixels height here. Notice that Android Studio also gives me a warning saying avoid using px as units, use dp instead. Let me show you what happens when you run the app. So notice that I'm using the default emulator instead of Genymotion because the default emulator cannot be scaled up or down. It works exactly as per the real screen size scaled on the screen. So here if you take a look, 256 looks like it's taking 1/3 of the total space in terms of width for this one on Nexus 4. But here on Nexus 6P, 256 looks like a very small block. You can fit at least 5 more of them over here. And that's the difference. If you use dp here instead of pixels, let's make it 256 dp. It's going to be quite a number. We should actually make it 128 dp because it scales very high, right? So if you say 128 dp here. Alright, now let's run the app. Notice that this time when you run the app, 128 dp on Nexus 4 looks like it's gonna take roughly 1/3 of the screen space. On Nexus 6P as well, it looks roughly to take the same size. Now the idea here is that it scales and tries to maintain that ratio in terms of width and height on different devices, and that is why you use dp instead of pixels. SP is used when it comes to font sizes. In Android, when you have text view or any other widget that displays text, you will always use an SP for its font size. Now why is this so? What happens if we use dp over here? Notice that I have a text view here and I have set the text size as 16 dp. Android Studio also says use SP instead of dp. SP has all the properties of dp plus it takes the user font scaling into effect. Let me show you what this means. Right now I have my app running here and the font size, as you notice, it says is 16 dp. Well, is that 16? Let me try running it again. Yeah, there you go. There's the font size with 16 dp over here. Now what happens if I say minimize the app, go to settings, go to display, font size, and here I select large over here. Notice that all the fonts have become bigger under settings. But if I go to our app here, you see that the font size is unchanged. Once again, if you go back to settings, display, and if we go for the font size huge over here, again the font size has changed everywhere, but in our app the font size is still the same. This is why you don't use dp for font sizes. You use SP because it takes the scale into account as well. Let me show you what happens with SP over here. I say 16 SP for the font size. Now if we run the app, notice that our font size has become really huge. If I go to settings from here, and in the font size, I select large instead of huge, and if I go back to our app, the font size has become a bit smaller. We can go back and we can make it something, say, small over here. And if you start our app again, notice that the font size is reduced completely. This is the exact difference between SP and dp. SP changes when the user changes the font scale from settings or any other means, whereas dp doesn't. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a nice day.